Welcome. You are tuned in to www.Radio Asistencia Humanitaria Lima.org. This is a program, Migrants, which comes on Saturdays at noon, and I have the pleasure of being with you once more. And today I have for you an article written in the opinion pages of the New York Times of June 9. The article is contributed by Professor Peter A. Schuch. He's a professor at Yale Law School and the author most recently of Why Governments Fail So Often and How It Can Do Better. And now I proceed to read the article. Creating a market for refugees in Europe. This year we have seen a record number of refugees trying and too often dying to get across Europe's Mediterranean frontier, propelled by brutal wars, the collapse of Libya and other states, environmental disasters, and grinding poverty that both cause and feed on this human misery. The seemingly unending flow of migrants, on top of earlier flows by economic migrants desperately seeking entry to Europe's common labor market, has thrown the continent's politics and policy makers into crisis, placing support systems under strain and fueling a surge in right-wing extremism. Given Europe's commitment to a humanitarian policy, the question is not whether to let the genuine refugees in, but where they should go. The European Union is considering a system of quotas that can both distribute the burdens of refugee protection among participant states and create alternatives so that migrants won't be forced to pay smugglers to cram them into unseaworthy vessels and dump them near shore, or worse. Negotiating such a system will be very difficult. Countries have an incentive to free ride on their neighbors' benevolence. They also know that it gets harder to send refugees back home the longer they remain, so they offer only temporary safe haven, if that. Some states, like Germany and Sweden, did more than their share in past crises and may want their quotas lowered to reflect this. Refugees also have diverse incentives. Although all want protection, many hope to end up in prosperous countries where they might settle permanently. Others hope to return home as soon as conditions permit. A scheme allocating protection burdens according to each state's capacities, much as the European Union is likely to adopt, is essential. A regional authority should calculate each state's fair share using objective criteria such as gross domestic product, population, and landmass. The formula might also grant credits for past protection efforts. It should also estimate how many refugees need protection, temporary or permanent, and how many of those can legally qualify for it. Mere economic migrants cannot. Here's my proposed innovation. The agency should create and regulate a market in which states can buy and sell all or part of their protection quota obligations. Both the agency and the selling state must enforce international standards to ensure that the receiving state protects the human rights of those it agrees to accept. Just as cap and trade schemes enhance environmental protection, this market would maximize the number of refugees protected by exploiting differences in states' resources, politics, geography, and attitudes toward newcomers. A more ethnically homogeneous or xenophobic state might eagerly pay a high price in cash, credit, commodities, political support, development assistance, or some other valuable, to more refugee-friendly states to assume its burden, rather than having to bring them in-country. Such payments already take place in a way. The United States and other countries sometimes pay other states to harbor immigrants. Australia just agreed to give Cambodia $32 million to do so. Almost by definition, such a market would produce more protection than the status quo does, while ensuring that each state does its share in one form or another and that human rights are respected. Other questions must be resolved. For example, how much of a refugee's identity could states learn before trading? Could refugees veto being sent to a particular protecting state? International law would say no. It merely bars returning them to persecution and require a harboring state to meet their basic needs. How would the agency enforce these obligations? Some will object that the market element offends common morality by commodifying refugees. But if trading protects more refugees than the status quo does, under conditions at least as favorable to their human rights, the newly protected will surely welcome it, just as environmentalists now endorse the trading of pollution rights. Critics need a reality check. Whether they object on the grounds of national interest, weak enforcement, or on the fear of dehumanizing the people they are trying to help, they must recognize that these problems apply to an even greater extent to current refugee arrangements. We must not let the perfect be the enemy of the better. Even an imperfect reform may still make more refugees better off. Europe has several advantages in designing such a system. It is wealthy, faces long-term worker shortages because of low fertility, can work with the European Union's institutions and resources, and knows that prompt collective action is urgent. In contrast to, say, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations' recent disarray in the face of large refugee flows from Myanmar and Bangladesh. Europe also can build on an earlier model. The Vietnam War and its after effects pushed out millions of refugees who were then often turned back by some countries of first asylum. In 1979, after a tragically slow start, the United States assembled a large coalition to provide both temporary relief and permanent resettlement for some 1.7 million refugees, though not before countless thousands died. Adding a market element might have protected even more. And that's it for this article, which really gives us a lot to think, food for thought, and, well, we can really go on about this, and hopefully we will be able to have your comments and talk about this. In effect, this sounds like a really great idea, except that there is that one thing about dehumanizing people and treating them maybe as merchandise. And now we're going to, of course, try and get in touch with our European correspondent, Theodora Raleigh, and she is going to have some input about the problem in Syria. And also, I have asked Juan Carlos to host Theodora for this time. And as we're going to try and put Theodora live on our phones right now so that she can contribute. In the meantime, here are some quick headlines. Kuwait gives you the U.S. $121 million to help funds UN HCR Syria crisis response. Migrants and refugees on Western Balkans routed increasing risk. And here is Theodora Raleigh with us. I believe that got her on the phone right now. And are we ready to go on air right now? Juan Carlos?
Yes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, Theodora. This is from Lima, Radio Asistencia Humanitaria Lima. Hi, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm fine. Good afternoon to you and to Marina.
Okay, can you speak a little bit louder and can you start your report, please?
Of course, yes. Okay, today you're talking about the humanitarian crisis in Syria. So just a bit, I'm not sure if you talked about this already during the show, but just to a short description of what is a humanitarian crisis, or else called disaster or emergency. So a humanitarian crisis is defined as a singular event or series of events that are threatening in terms of health, safety, or well-being of a community. And in these cases, several factors or events prevent people from having access to basic needs like food, water, and shelter. These can be triggered, this crisis, by internal or by several events, actually, or by internal or external conflicts, for example, and they usually occur at a large land area. They can be categorized like natural disasters, man-made or complex emergencies, and each one requires a different and customized approach that will answer to the specific needs of the affected population. Now, concerning the Syrian humanitarian crisis, one could say that it's a complex one because it is characterized by extensive violence and loss of life, by displacements of populations, by widespread damage to societies and economies, the need for large-scale, multifaceted humanitarian assistance, also by the impediment of or prevention sometimes of humanitarian assistance by the political and military forces that rule the country, and of significant security risk for humanitarian relief workers in some areas. They are not allowed to enter certain areas. So right now, a lot of Syrian people are residing in areas that are difficult for humanitarian actors to reach, for example. Generally speaking, the Syrian conflict, it's on its fifth year now, has triggered the world's largest humanitarian crisis since World War II. The needs of the population, humanitarian needs, continue to rise. As I said, there is a lot of people are displaced, and an entire generation of children is being exposed to war and violence and is deprived of basic services like education and, of course, protection. The conflict in general has until now cost the life of more than 200,000 Syrians. Half of them is believed to be civilians. A lot of cities have been destroyed by bombings, and human rights violations are widely spread. Basic necessities like food and medical care are sparse. As of 2015, the conflict has displaced about 12 million people, which is more than half of Syria's population. 7.6 of them are internally displaced, meaning that they have left their cities and have moved to other places within the country. The rest, 4 million, have searched for shelter in neighboring countries, mainly Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, and Iraq. These people have are asylum seekers, and a few of them are registered refugees. and their numbers are growing every year. So in 2012, there were there were 100,000 refugees, but this number increased to 800,000 by April 2013, and it doubled in less than 4 months. So the scattered Syrians, 4 million scattered Syrians throughout the region, make them constitute the world's largest refugee population under the United Nations mandate. And at this rate, if this rate continues, the UN predicts that there will be about 4 million, even more than 4 million refugees by the end of 2015, which will be the worst exodus since the genocide in Rwanda 20 years ago. Concerning the countries where the refugees have searched for shelter, Turkey hosts the most of the people of the Syrians that have fled their country. So it's around 1.7 million people that have sought shelter in Turkey. And this number is about to reach almost 2 million within 2015. Only some 200,000 people stay in government-run camps. There are 22 of them near the Syrian-Turkish borders. The rest of Syrians, they live in urban communities around the country of Turkey. Just to be noted is that they are recognized not as refugees according to the 1951 Refugee Convention, but as conditional refugees due to a declaration that the Turkish government made on geographical and temporal limitation, so by which it limited itself only to accepting refugees from European countries. Since April 2014, with the adoption of a new law, Turkish government has taken in and is able to provide protection and assistance for people, for asylum seekers and refugees coming from countries other than the countries of the European Union. Until this is temporary, and this is until they are able to seek refugee in a third country. In Lebanon, there is the second largest community of Syrian population of Syrian refugees. Almost 1,200,000 people live there, where they have made actually by themselves temporary camps or have found shelter in abandoned buildings across the country. In Jordan, there are 600,000 Syrian refugees, and they reside in camps like Zaatari and Asrak, which is the one that opened quite recently, 1 year ago, and they are quite organized. They resemble small villages with sometimes schools and shops and sports fields. However, still most of the Syrian refugees live outside of the camps. They live in apartments, in abandoned buildings, as said before. And a lot of them are also in Iraq and in Egypt, although fewer in numbers than the ones in Turkey, Lebanon, and Jordan. They have some, of course, have families they could settle in with, but still they face a lot of difficulties in these new countries of residence, where a lot of times they are not legally they are not able to find a legal way to work. Then the language is, of course, always a barrier, and not to. It should be mentioned that a lot of times in these camps there is other kind of difficulties. There is lack of clean water and sanitation. They are always crowded. Diseases are easily spread. And sometimes the medical services are not enough. In some areas with the largest refugee populations, water shortages have reached emergency levels, and the supply, for example, can be as low as 30 liters per person. So it's 1/10 of what, for example, the average American or European uses. And as said before, children and the youngsters face an uncertain future. They lack school education. They are not able to attend education, and a lot of families cannot afford the transportation to get kids to school, for instance. Concerning the Syrian conflict had huge and effect on the Syrian population, cities. It also affected the economy, which right now is of course a wreck. 4 out of 5 Syrians live in poverty, and the unemployment rate is over 50%. A lot of public hospitals, more than half actually, have been damaged, and a lot of the country's doctors have fled the country.
Hi, Theodora. Theodora, do you hear me?
Yes.
We need to stop here because I'm sorry, we are close to the deadline of the program. And please,
okay.
I beg your pardon, but we have to interrupt your transmission and to your broadcasting. So we will be in touch next week at the same time with the following report, international report on humanitarian and migrants and displaced people issues. Okay?
Okay. Thank you very much for the call.
Thank you also to you, Theodora. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Theodora. Okay, thank you, Juan Carlos. This has been a really heartbreaking report. And I think we all are aware of what is happening, but yet the numbers are astronomical. And I was able to catch some, like 200,000 have lost their lives already. And also, this is half of these are civilians. So that's over 100,000 civilians have lost their life in this conflict, ongoing war. 12 million people have been displaced, and that is half the population of Syria. The situation is really dire. Safety, of course, there is none, and food and water are scarce, so is shelter. It's a very complex crisis with extreme violence and displacement, and what is worse, there is severe risk to the humanitarian workers that are not allowed or cannot reach some people, so that they cannot give them any assistance or any kind of help. A whole entire generation of children are being deprived of basic needs and education. Of course, there's no way to do any of these things, And then, of course, the conflict affects all the surrounding nearby countries. They too are suffering consequences. For example, Theodora was sharing that 600 refugees are in Jordan, and also they have camps near the borders of Syria and Turkey, and in Libya there's over 1 million people displaced. So the numbers are just terrible. It's something that we all need to be aware of and keep up with, and we really appreciate that you tune with us today. And again, I'm going to thank you very much for contributing by listening and spreading the word. And I'm going to repeat one more time. That address for us is www.radio asistencia humanitaria_lima.org. And the program is Migrants, and it comes on Saturdays at 12. And we certainly have decided, with the information that we have received and contributions, that people would appreciate the program being bilingual. So I apologize for today. We have run out of time. And next week, we'll meet again, hopefully here at Radio Asistencia Humanitaria, Lima.org. Thank you. We'll see you next Saturday at 12.